Thank you, our participants who are staying for another hour of PD development. We will talk about the most appealing topic, teacher happiness, right? Isn't it everyone's dream? Please join me in welcoming our presenter today, John Sivell. He is a professor of applied linguistics and interim director of the Center for Intercultural Studies at Brock University. He came to his interest in professional happiness over the span of a career that has included periods of service as both an educational administrator and an ESL, EFL, or TESOL instructor in Canada and abroad. He's a TESOL Ontario accredited TESOL trainer and teacher of adult ESL, and currently his teaching centers on TESOL methodology courses in Brock's Bachelor of Arts, Master of Arts, and Certificate in Teaching English as Second Language programs. Thank you, Jeff, for accepting our invitation and for your willingness to do a webinar with us today. And I will pull up your slides and I will pass over to you.
Thank you. Okay, I've just, everything's good by me. If we're ready to go. Well, I just put my own image here briefly so that you can have a sense of who's talking to you. Thank you for the helpful and generous introduction, Juliana. I think we should probably get started right away, and I will probably take down my image and we'll pay attention to the slides themselves and the comments that you want to interject on the side panel. So here we go. I want to say, first of all, that I think that professional happiness is something that's very important because we all know that whether it is as a colleague who is working in an environment and working with other colleagues, or at an administrator who is introducing new colleagues and helping them get trained and whatnot, not to mention students, everyone is benefited when teachers are happy and committed and, among other things, stay in the job and stay in the profession. But teaching, like other professions, is subject to a degree of burnout. And I think there are ways that we can look at this issue of happiness, or if you want to take the negative side, burnout, and consider what we can do to promote our own happiness as teachers and our students' happiness, basically referring to much the same principles that affect all human beings. So I'm going to work through approximately the following series of steps with you. We'll have some graphics to look at, and I would be very happy for you to chime in with comments. I hope you do. Then we'll go back and look a little bit at definitions, because happiness is slightly more complicated, at least the psychologists tell us it is, than we might suppose. From there, we'll go on to a pie graph activity, or a couple, where you get to look at your own daily professional and personal schedules in terms of different sources of happy experience. And then we'll look at one or two, probably just one, actual case that we can discuss in terms of how we can realistically apply what we know about happiness. When the time comes, we'll probably have a vote or something and decide which one is the right one to go ahead with. If we miraculously have time for both, so much the better. But anyway, Juliana has made sure that the PDFs for both are available, and we're free to go as we will. And then I'd like to end up by going back to the big picture, a few broad comments from wise sources, and opportunities for all of us to make our own comments as well. So here is a slide with a couple of interesting graphics. I'd be very interested in knowing what you think a good caption or commentary would be for this set of graphics. Well, indeed, yes. Working and thinking of sleeping is part of it. Um, and then we have the other part of it, yes. What's going on here? Certainly, getting enough sleep and having time to get enough sleep is certainly a factor. Um, I think that one of the things that the graphic suggests is this work-life balance, where there can be uh, a harmony between different elements of experience. It's interesting to notice the picture of the girl here. She's looking pretty satisfied over here where she's sleeping. She's looking a bit grim. If I can see her mouth properly, she seems to be frowning, and she's frowning down here. So when she's sleeping and dreaming of work, it looks a little negative. Um, Certainly, thinking about work can prevent us from getting good sleep or as much sleep. What's the balance is the question, I think. Let's go on from that comment. Yes, exactly. When I'm doing the one, I should be doing the other. Let's go on and think of this comment about the balance. Yes, okay, Hamlet. Um, Here are four graphics about work-life balance, or relatively the same, but they're different graphics. Each one of them has got something to be said for it, although you might have a favorite, but there isn't any one that doesn't tell us something. What do you think about these graphics? Are there any that you think are especially shrewd, or any that show something that is important? Is there a number one graphic? Yes, the crossword. Uh, When I show these graphics to people, they often like the crossword one. How come? One of the things that comes up in the crossword one, I think, in terms of these matches, is that, which is probably what you mean by matches, they're interwoven. Yes, there are letters which serve in more than one word, as a crossword does. All of the other three graphics have got an opposition, a dichotomy. There's an integration in the crossword one. Overlapping or equal. Yes, the question is this, I guess. What do people think? Is it an ideal to get this interrelationship, or is it actually feasible? Is it a practical thing or just a dream? Well, indeed, yes. There is, of course, a contrast in colors, so that we still have a dichotomy, if you wish. Hmm. Funny that we have family on the one side, career on the other side, work intersecting with career, life intersecting with family, and balance intersecting with both family and career. I think I can look around my workplace and my professional association and identify people who either by my inference or by what they tell me um, have difficulty, which I do not criticize, actually, this is hard, making that balance. And maybe even are a little angry about not being able to make that balance. Am I the only one to have noticed this? What do you think? The frustration is a key point, I think. Yeah, the frustration is important. Let's pick up on the idea of the frustration of the difficulty, legitimate difficulty, and look at a couple of definitions here. The people that I think are really smart about happiness and have done actual psychological studies, and we'll look at those a little, won't be too heavy, but I'll give you some sources. Ryan and Deci, who have developed what they call self-determination theory, point out that for ages, like not just right now, but forever, there have been these two ways of looking at happiness. The eudaimonic way of looking at it and the hedonic way, as you can see on the slide there. And basically, the eudaimonic version of it is a much broader notion of happiness. It's not simply subjective well-being or immediate joy. It's got something to do with overall well-being. That's why at the bottom of the slide, I've put two red words there, chocolate and broccoli. And somebody said, yeah, chocolate tastes good, but broccoli's better for me. Yeah, eudaimonic's a new word. I didn't invent it. We have to blame Brian and Deci for that. They're Greek words, of course. The point is that, yeah, I think we can associate broccoli with which one? Eudaimonic or hedonic? Well, I'm going to suggest that eudaimonic goes with broccoli and that you won't need to learn to pronounce it because I'm going to refer to it as broccoli from now on. And hedonic goes with chocolate. It really tastes good immediately, and then you have to pay later. Um, but there's something else here that you might want to bear in mind, I think, and it'll come up obliquely through what I want to say. We often say in a jocular way that chocolate is a guilty pleasure. You know, we know that it has calories in it, and we know that sometimes it's not good for our skin and whatnot, and yet we love the flavor of it, so we kind of eat it in a slightly guilty way. Um, well, the notion that you can be a little guilty about feeling happy is an important one to bear in mind. Because what I want to emphasize is that there's a way of thinking about happiness that's going to make us better professionals, as well as making us happier. It's going to be good for us, as well as being good for our students. In other words, we have permission to be happy. And I think that's an important thing, and we get that well from self-determination theory. Here's the connection with self-determination theory. I'll go to broccoli now, just to keep things simple. Um, and well, yeah, broccoli. It does. Chocolate is good for the brain, so let's not do poor chocolate down too much. Um, but this notion here, under the eudaimonic heading, of doing what's worth doing, the kind of broad sense of well-being and intrinsic motivation, is what self-determination theory emphasizes. It emphasizes intrinsic motivation for a purely self-interested reason, which is that intrinsic motivation seems to work better. And there's going to be evidence for this as we go through. And basically, according to self-determination theory and what Ryan and Deci and the others have looked at, and they've looked at this in studies around the world, not just in North America. There's a claim that this is culturally universal, which is a big deal, is that long-term happiness, as you say, um, comes from intrinsic motivation. Looking back at a long career, you saw me at the beginning there, an old guy, and thinking about what I'd done good, so to speak, it's going to be what's worth doing. And Ryan and Deci say competence, autonomy, and relatedness are three key elements in this, and basically you don't get intrinsic motivation and that kind of happiness if you don't have all three. And I think there's evidence that we're not good at paying attention to all three, and that's not good for us or our students. So there they are. There's the three. You can see the definitions. I hardly need to repeat them. To read them out. They're pretty much what they look like. Can you think of and there's a source, and you can find it at the end of the slide set. I believe a PDF of the slides has been made available. If you want to dig this up, you can get it. I should say to you, too, if you want to Google self-determination theory and maybe throw in the names Ryan and Deci, you will find the brand new site. The old one was hacked, and the new one's just been created, where they have a ton of well-organized research studies in every area, including teaching, so that you don't have to wade through it. You can zoom to exactly what you want. It's extremely user-friendly, and there's some overviews. It's really interesting stuff. So if you like this, there are places to find out about it which are not too painful. Anyway, examples. Can you think of examples where in your work, or looking at one of your colleagues' work or your students' work, that somebody feels like they're experiencing one of competence, autonomy, or relatedness? What are some examples? Yeah, there's the website. Good work, Briar. Any examples of when you've experienced competence, autonomy, and or relatedness when you were a teacher? Well, let me start. If I'm redesigning my course outline for the upcoming fall term, which I'm just thinking about doing right now, I will have a sense of competence if I feel like I have discovered one or two things that work very well in the old course outline, and I'm going to keep them. And if I find one or two things that I think I can improve, and if I feel like I can exercise my skill. Autonomy, yeah. Somebody said, Ivana, attending a web development on professional development webinar on a day off. Sure, you choose to do it. Nobody forces you to do it. You can do it if you want to. You don't have to do it. Coming back to the course outline, when you think about it, you don't have to update it. You could update it if you wanted to. You don't have to update it. So there is the notion that autonomy and competence can overlap in a place like that, because when you have the competence to do it, you also have the opportunity to exercise that in ways that you see fit and when you want to. I'm lucky. I work at a university. I have things to do in the summer, but I don't have to wait until the last minute to update my course outline, and I feel good about that freedom. Relatedness. How about relatedness? A collaborative project, says Juliana. Very good example. Other examples of relatedness. Collaborating with colleagues, for sure. And that's one of the things that, well, sometimes we can collaborate with colleagues. Admittedly, we can't always do that. But we would like our colleagues to be happy enough that they want to collaborate, facing the same issues, yes, and helping solve them. Some of us work in a unionized environment, and that's the place where we sometimes work together to solve problems. Other times we informally do that. That's important, I think. But we can have relatedness with our students as well, of course. in that many of us who are second language instructors, myself and maybe all of you, know at least one other language. So we also face the same issues or have faced the same issues as our students have faced. We know what deadlines are like. We know what tricky grammar or complicated vocabulary or uh, demanding reading comprehension is. And so there's an experience of relatedness for teachers in relation to their students as well as their colleagues. And it goes for competence and autonomy too, right? That is to say, um, when a student asks a question and you have a very good answer for it and feel like you can answer it well, that's competence. When you are asked a tough question and you don't know the answer yet, and when that happens to us, then you have the autonomy to say, I'll get back to you on that one tomorrow. And especially if there's enough relatedness in the classroom, the students will say, okay, good, do that. That's great. I trust you. I want to say that what Ryan and Deji tell us, and if we think about it, what we experience is that these things are joined together. I think that's important. And the theory says we won't be well adjusted and happy unless we have a pretty good dose of all three of those. Neither will our students. Let's just go on here. Yes, this is interesting. As you see at the top of the slide, the literature says that we need all three of them. And basically, if one of them is missing or very underrepresented, it will undercut the effectiveness of the others. And you can't just sort of pig out on one and ignore the others. But if you think about professional development literature for teachers, there's a very strong emphasis in there on competence, how to know more about fair and effective testing, how to know more about curriculum design, how to know more about language acquisition, and so on. And perhaps there's some stuff in there about autonomy, but not a lot. It looks as if you want to help a teacher move ahead, you improve their competence. If you want to help a colleague move ahead, you help them improve their competence. The relatedness element doesn't seem to come in there all that much. I've just got one quote because otherwise we'd do this forever. But I think that quote down there, update their technical knowledge, build their repertoire of skills in their practice. It does say their own repertoire, that's autonomy, but it's skill-oriented very strongly. I think this is a key issue. There's nothing wrong with competence, for goodness sake, nor autonomy. It could be that the one we don't pay enough attention to is relatedness. And if the theory's right, we're not helping ourselves there. Now, if you look at the self-determination theory studies about relatedness, it's teacher-teacher relationships. If you go to the website that has been helpfully put up there, you'll notice that. And yet, teacher-student relatedness, when you ask teachers, seems to be a key issue. And I bet people in the room right now would say that one of their key relatedness satisfaction sources and experiences is relatedness to students. You didn't have much trouble coming up with comments about helping students find answers for themselves, knowing what they're going through, and so on. If we had a vote, if Liliana can help us have a vote here, and we were going to vote on, a little artificially, which of the three sources of satisfaction in teaching, competence, autonomy, or relatedness, brought the biggest overall satisfaction and joy for being a teacher, who would vote for competence? Excuse me, I made a mistake. Who would vote for relatedness? I have a feeling a majority might, but let's find out. Can we have a vote on that, Juliana? In favor of...
Yes, please. So
Relatedness.
if you want to grab the raise your hand button, it's just in between the users list and webcam area. It's on the left side of the screen. And if you click on it, you will see the hand raised next to your name.
Ah, so I see two already here.
Okay,
Well,
so
maybe
this was for relatedness, right?
maybe I got this wrong. So, well, there's three now, four. We could try the others. I'm not forcing it, but it looks around 50-50 maybe. It's hard to separate. You're so right. You're so right. How about competence? That's the one that gets a lot of attention. Who would raise their hand for competence? It
So
matters
far.
after all. Everyone who is certified by TESOL Ontario or TESOL Canada, etc., has had a big dose of competence and is a competent person, so competence matters. Well, I think the issue is this. We want to think about ways to have all three of them. If self-determination theory is right, this is how we're going to be happiest and most effective, and this is how our students are going to be happiest too. Let's move on here. I'm going to suggest that you take a piece of paper, separate from this. You don't do this online. There's no hand to raise. But could you pull out a piece of paper and make a pie graph? I'll show you an example in just a sec. Could you make a pie graph, a circle with slices of pie, in which you indicate what the size of the slice is for competence, for autonomy, or relatedness during a typical working day? Or there may be a slice which is not related to any of those things. Let me show you mine, just as there's mine. Of course, some, just like you said, it's hard to separate. So some activities match more than one category. Some academic work has got competence and autonomy, and for that matter, relatedness, perhaps as well. We didn't have a vote for autonomy. No. Shall we have a vote for autonomy?
Yes, let's vote.
Okay.
Q for autonomy.
Is that a low vote because you don't think it's that important, or is it a low vote because you just don't have a chance to get it? There's no doubt that if the theory is right, and I think it is, they all matter. So that's my graph. It doesn't have to be the same as your graph, of course, but it solves this problem that there are times of the day which are not related to anything. I only get 7 hours sleeping usually. Maybe I should get a bit more. And that's how I divide up the rest of what's going on. How about you make yours, and we'll get some comments on them once you've made them. I'll show you what the questions are going to be. Oh, hang on. No, I won't. Okay, so let's just draw the pie graph. I'll give you a couple of minutes for this. How about you put your hand up if you want more time? And if I don't see any hands, I'll move on because we can move on. So somebody says 1 hour cooking. Now that's an interesting point. For me, if it was 1 hour cooking, that might actually be autonomy because the things I like to cook. Is that autonomy for you? Yeah. How about walking with the dogs? I guess that's autonomy. Or is that actually an obligatory activity? Yeah. Okay. We got to get some autonomy here. Can I go on to my next issue with you? Hey, if you can get it 50-50, you're doing pretty nicely. Think as you like. Now look, how about this? Either just kind of mark up your existing pie graph, or turn the page over, or use a space beside that one, and make your ideal pie graph. Not the gruesome one with only 7 hours sleeping, but the one that would be your perfect world if you could balance things the way you really wanted. You get to get rid of the cooking, maybe. And as you're working on that, I'm going to put up the questions that I'd like us to be able to discuss when looking at the differences between the two pie graphs. So I see a number of suggestions about how you could make adjustments that you think would be beneficial, which is interesting because I'm sure we would all want to uh, make some adjustments. That's that's human nature. That's our lives. Um, Now, the question is, how are we going to make any adjustments? How are we going to seize opportunities to exercise as richly and fully as possible autonomy, competence, and relatedness? We can't go into all of life, but we could have an example to discuss. In general, it's an impossible question. I agree with that comment. But we have these two case studies. Now, you've seen the two case studies because they've been sent out if you registered in advance. One of them's about student plagiarism, and the other one's about a new colleague adjusting to a new environment and you as a kind of mentor. So the student plagiarism one has to do with student-teacher interactions, and the new colleague one has to do with colleague-to-colleague teacher-to-teacher interactions. I tentatively put the plagiarism one up first, thinking we may only do one anyhow, but we'll see. And there's no reason for it to be there. We can do the the teacher-teacher one about a new colleague first, and maybe only, or we can do the student plagiarism one first, and maybe only. So I think we need a vote on that, because we can easily do what you would like. So who votes for sticking with student plagiarism as the first and maybe only one? Okay, just two. This is going to be your last minute. Okay.
Well, if I think some people cannot identify the raise your hand button. It's just in between the users list and web camera area on the left side, in the middle of the left side of the screen. You can click on it to raise your hand if you want to vote for looking into case for study with student plagiarism right now. So we have 3 votes for
Okay.
student plagiarism.
So that it sounds like, unless there's a technical problem with clicking, we would rather do the one about teacher-teacher, which is fine by me too. So I'm going to go to that one. Okay. Here we go. Just a second. Lost it. Oops.
I will just pull it up.
Oh, okay. Good. Good. Thanks. Thanks. Thank you very much. Now, folks, Juliana has made this as big as possible so that it's readable on the screen without getting eye strain, and it's not too long, but it needs some detail because what I would like you to do is to answer this question: where do we go from here? What should we do? And I'd like you to think about answering that in terms of what you can do as a mentor, what the new teacher can receive as a newcomer to the group in terms of experiencing confidence, autonomy, and relatedness. But you're going to take a minute to read this, so I'm going to shut up and just let you have a look at it. I see some comments are coming up and everyone can see them, so that's useful. Um, and the comments are substantial. Uh, if we look at this, what she says at the end there, I'm not sure if I'll be happy here. What should I do? Um, can we tease out why she's not happy? Can we think of some suggestions to open up autonomy, relatedness, or competence in a way that would be good, good, good for her well-being and happiness? Change is always a challenge, that's for sure. Okay, now you mentioned relatedness. Um, I guess that goes back to the issue about the invisible barrier, although maybe relatedness comes from the lack of commitment that she seems to perceive with the students. She certainly wants her students here to be more like the ones at the refugee camp where she was volunteering, and they're not. Um, has anyone got anything to say about this invisible barrier issue? She's a certified teacher, yep. She did teacher education, and then she went abroad. She volunteered for 2 years. She came back. She's a certified ESL teacher, that's for sure. Yeah, I think we can assume that. But she says that there's this professional reserve. There's a lot of in-class activity, but there's not a lot of out-of-class socialization. That wasn't the same when she was working in Southeast Asia in the refugee camp. Relatedness doesn't have to happen outside class, of course. That's an interesting um, element in that the invisible barrier only applies to out of class, not in class. I like the fact that people have mentioned all of these issues, um, competence, autonomy, and relatedness. But it's interesting, I think, that she wants to get a balance there, right? Apparently, she's happy that there's a good resource room and that the classroom itself is nice, that she's working with teachers who put in the time, that at least some of the students recognize that they're doing that. But current needs of the learners and teachers here, yes. But we think about the learners here. If we think about the learners she's describing, to what extent are they getting an experience of um, competence? Do we see things in her comments there that suggest that at least some of them are getting an experience of competence that she should be satisfied that she's able to contribute to? It is important to notice that she says that the students recognize the staff as contributing to their learning process. So that's a place where competence definitely comes in, and maybe relatedness too. Um, In terms of autonomy, what do you make of the comment that some students show low motivation and take their study as a semi-vacation? It is financed by their parents, so I take it that this is a international student program and not a linked program. Comment that you have to think about the current needs of the learners and teachers rather than dwelling on a nostalgic comparison is presumably a sensible point. All the same, she says she pretty much got what she wanted in a job, and yet she's not sure if she'll be happy. What should she do? But what should she do? If you were a program manager and you had a new colleague who'd just been hired with a profile such as this young woman, what would you do to, as a manager, to try to assure that the newcomer had a nice soft landing and a happy integration into the job? Have you got any suggestions for what a manager should do here? There isn't anything in here about we're not told about any introduction to the site or any social event or anything that was done. Yeah, and now I see some suggestions: an induction and mentoring program. Indeed, yes. Okay, where should you go from here? Um, Natalia says, ask her what's on her mind. Yes, that's obviously a good idea. Um, then we might find out if there are underlying personal issues. Yes. Um, it is an interesting uh, thought that there could be something completely outside the teaching situation. Interesting. There's an interesting thought here that you might want to use as partly a way to conclude this. Everybody knows the golden rule, which is do unto others as you would have them do unto you. But some intercultural studies theorists, I would say 10 or 15 years ago, came up with what they called the platinum rule. And the platinum rule was do unto others as they would have you do unto them, which is a lot less ethnocentric and more open to looking at asking why she thinks she won't be happy here and so on. Perhaps that's what we need to be thinking about. Juliana, it's 6 minutes to the end of the hour. Let's go back to the slides. We'll look at a little more information that way, and then we'll have a little time to come to a conclusion, okay? All right, now I'll just push us ahead here as soon as I can control. Natalia says, ask her as a manager what I can do to help you feel better here. I think that's a key issue, yes. you've been making comments that relate to both chocolate and broccoli, I think. So I think you've got that somewhat covered here. Um, Getting back to the big picture, Workopolis actually suggests that in 2003, the happiest job was a teaching or research assistant, which is not quite a teacher, I admit. 2011, Forbes magazine listed special education teachers and teachers in general among the most happy professions, the top 10. You see the top 10 listed there. Clergy were the happiest. Operating engineers, they're people who operate heavy machinery, like buses or uh, uh, cranes and things like that are the happiest. But in any case, teaching type activity keeps getting mentioned as one of the happiest things we can do. Kind of interesting. Getting back to this intrinsic extrinsic thing, Ryan and Decci and Nemiec wrote this article called The Path Taken, talking about students finishing their university education, going on into their careers, and trying to measure by self-reporting what the students expressed as their main drivers. Things that you can relate to intrinsic aspirations or extrinsic aspirations. Extrinsic being the ones listed at the bottom there, fairly obvious and not trivial either, money, fame, and image, such as personal appearance. And intrinsic being personal growth, relationships, community involvement, physical health. Again, I think we've got broccoli at the top and chocolate at the bottom in terms of those two. And the interesting thing is that when they were followed up later, there was a pretty clear correlation that intrinsic aspirations led to well-adjusted and happy outcomes, and that extrinsic motivations, as logical and reasonable as they are, were not actually associated with happiness, psychological adjustment, and psychological health. In other words, the predictions of self-determination theory that we want to move over to as much intrinsic motivation as possible seem to be true. Hada says in Saudi Arabia, in language schools, few seem to have intrinsic motivation. I have worked in Saudi Arabia. It was some years ago. Yes, there's often big money to be made around the Gulf and other places abroad, and extrinsic motivation is a big issue. This is something that should matter to managers of schools too, because if we want to keep our teachers whom we've trained and got to be good performers happy and staying working with us, we want them to be intrinsically motivated. Yes, the difference between expats and locals. This is a key issue. I want you to look at this slide for just a second more, because what it's telling us is that that we have permission to make ourselves happy and to follow genuinely happiness producing intrinsic aspirations, and they will not only make us happier, but make our students happier and make us better teachers. So it's not a selfish thing to want to be happy. Now, that's a long traditional philosophical idea. Nemiec, Ryan, and Decci actually refer back to Aristotle. Happiness belongs more to those who have cultivated their character and mind to the utmost and kept acquisition of external goods within moderate limits than it does to those who have managed to acquire more external goods than they can possibly use and are lacking goods of the soul. Any excessive amount of such things must either cause its possessor some injury or, at any rate, bring him no benefit. And that's exactly what the data shows us, that it may not do any harm, but it doesn't do any good, and it may do some harm. Very interesting thing. Broccoli, I think, is winning out here. Just one last slide. We don't have to go back to Aristotle. We can take something right from 2013. Funny enough, in a book that just came out about happiness, we see this notion that it's not just a sum of pleasures, it's not just a balance of pleasure and pain, that somehow it's not a life entirely without pains. It's a life that's not aimless and pointless. It's a life that has a sense of achievement. I think that's what we're looking for. And if we analyze our situation, our colleagues' situation, our students' situation, the situation of people we may be mentoring, I think that this intrinsic motivation, which appears to imply a good balance of competence, autonomy, and relatedness, is what we need to go with. So this means, Juliana, that your mom was right to get you to be an English teacher because you ended up loving it. When I chose to be a teacher, that was a long time ago. That was in Canada. University teachers were very badly paid, but it was a great job. What about others? Do you buy the broccoli solution or not? Maybe we should end up with a vote. That really says broccoli. Well, you're going to be healthy. That's good. Okay, so look, we're just about at the end here, and I don't want to hold you guys up. With some chocolate at the end of the tunnel, why not? Yes. Are there any questions that you'd like to ask me about sources, ideas, anything else that I can do that may be on your mind? I'd be happy to respond. I'll put myself back on so you can see me here paying attention. So, anything that anyone would like to raise at the beginning as a general question that I or some others present might be able to answer. Holy mackerel. That means everybody knows everything now. Are we all good then? Okay, Juliana, over to you, I think.
Thank you so much, John. I think we all now should be happy. Should we?
Well, we should be, yes. But I think the key message is probably that we deserve to be, that it's good for everybody if we are, that it's not selfish, but it's not simple.
For sure. Be a teacher is as much for us as to be a doctor, I think.
Yeah.
Same influence on someone's life. That's why we have to be responsible.
I think so, yeah.
I need broccoli. Thank you so much, and thank you everyone for attending.